My mom took the bonus I'd saved for my son's school deposit to send my sister on a luxury anniversary trip, then said, "Your boy can wait. Her marriage matters more." I just nodded. 3 days later, she tried to check in for her flight and called my mom, screaming, "Hey guys, real quick before today's video. This channel has been growing because of people like you and we want to keep that going. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second and do that for us. It's the easiest way to support what we do here, and it helps us keep making the content you love. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's get started." At 4:52 a.m. on a Tuesday, my sister tried to check into her flight. By 4:53, she was calling my mother. By 4:54, my mother was calling me. I let it ring. I let it ring 6 times. Some watched the screen glow in the dark of my bedroom, watched her name pulse and disappear. Then the voicemail notification appeared. I did not listen to it that morning. I already knew what it would sound like. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 11 days. My name is Derek. I am 34 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Garfield Heights with my son Lucas, who just turned 8. The apartment is on the 3rd floor of a building that smells like laundry detergent in the hallways and has a buzzer system that works about half the time. It is not the life I planned, but it is the life I am building, one paycheck at a time, with my own hands and no one else's permission. 2 years ago, my wife left. Not dramatically, not with screaming or lawyers throwing papers across conference tables. She sat me down one evening after Lucas went to bed and told me she had been unhappy for a long time and that she had met someone who made her feel like a different person. I asked if she wanted to try counseling. She said, "I already know the answer, Derek. I just needed you to hear it from me first." That was it. No negotiation, no second chance. Just a woman who had already made her decision telling a man who was still catching up. I moved out within the month, took a lease on the apartment, split custody, and started rebuilding from a pile of cardboard boxes and a mattress on the floor. The first few weeks, Lucas would stand in the empty living room and ask me why the walls were bare. I told him we were starting fresh. He looked around and said, "Can I put my drawings up?" I said, "Every single one." And he did. The refrigerator, the bathroom mirror, the wall beside his bed, the back of the front door. That apartment became a gallery before it ever became a home. Some mornings, I would stand in the kitchen waiting for the coffee to brew and stare at those drawings and feel something so close to hope that I could almost hold it in my hands. The divorce reorganized everything. My finances, my schedule, my sleep, my sense of who I was in the world. But the one thing I refused to let collapse was Lucas's future. He had been enrolled in public school near the old house, but I had been researching Whitfield Academy for almost a year. Small classrooms, a reading program that actually challenged kids, a building that smelled like fresh paint and possibility, and a basketball court he would never stop asking about. "Dad, does Whitfield really have an indoor court?" he asked me one evening while I was making dinner. "Indoor and outdoor," I said. "Can I try out for the team even if I just started?" "You can try out for whatever you want, Lucas." He grinned so wide his front tooth gap showed. I turned back to the stove so he would not see my face. That grin was worth every night shift I had ever worked. The deposit was $7,400, due on October 15th. I had been saving since January, not from some corporate salary or family trust, from overtime, from skipped lunches, from selling the mountain bike I never rode anymore, from a small performance bonus my manager had awarded me in August, which I cashed and placed in a brown envelope inside my dresser drawer. Every dollar in that envelope had a name. Every dollar represented a night shift, a cold sandwich from a plastic bag, a weekend I picked up so someone else could take off. By early October, the envelope was full. I remember the weight of it in my hands. It felt like forward motion. It felt like the first real thing I had accomplished since the day my wife told me she was leaving. I made the mistake of telling my mother. Not the details, not the amount. I simply mentioned during a Sunday phone call that I had secured Lucas's enrollment deposit and planned to submit it the following week. "That's nice," she said. The 2 flattest words in the English language. I could hear the silence that followed, not the warm silence of a proud parent absorbing good news. The calculating silence of someone rearranging a ledger she thought no one else could see. My mother, Sandra, is a woman who has spent her entire adult life constructing a hierarchy and calling it love. She does not scream. She does not threaten. She does not slam doors or throw dishes or raise her voice above a carefully modulated register. She does something far more effective. She assigns value. And once she assigns your value, every decision she makes flows from that ranking with the quiet, merciless consistency of an accountant managing a portfolio she alone controls. After my divorce, my ranking dropped. Not in any conversation she would ever admit to having, but I could feel it. In the way she introduced me at family gatherings. Derek is doing his best. In the way she described my living situation. Derek is getting back on his feet. In the way she talked about Lucas's custody arrangement. Derek has him every other week, so he's managing. The language of gentle demotion. She never said I was failing, she just stopped saying I was succeeding. My sister Nicole occupied a different tier entirely. Nicole's marriage to a man named Brad was intact. Nicole's house had 4 bedrooms and a professionally landscaped yard. Nicole posted photos of Sunday brunch with matching linen napkins and a golden retriever resting beneath the dining table like a prop in a catalog. In my mother's economy, Nicole was a growth investment. I was a depreciating asset being carried on the books out of obligation. I should have recognized the pattern earlier. But when you grow up inside a system, you mistake the pressure for normal. 4 days after that phone call, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She brought a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil and a specific expression I had learned to read decades ago. It was the face she wore when she needed something but intended to present the entire conversation as though she were the one giving. She sat at my kitchen table, looked around at the small apartment with the second-hand couch and the crayon drawings Lucas had taped to the refrigerator, and she released a sigh so deliberate it could have been rehearsed. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked. "It's Nicole," she said, setting her purse on the table like a judge placing down a gavel. "She and Brad are going through something. Something really difficult, Derek." I poured her coffee, sat down across from her, waited. Their anniversary is next week and things have been rocky, I mean truly rocky. I think this marriage is in real danger if they don't reconnect. Not just a card and flowers, something meaningful, something that shows them both that the relationship is worth fighting for. "How bad is it?" I asked, playing along. "Bad enough that I worry, Derek. Brad has been distant. Nicole cries herself to sleep some nights. I hear it in her voice when she calls me. Has she thought about counseling?" "Counseling," my mother repeated, as if I had suggested something quaint and slightly ridiculous. "Counseling is for people who have time and patience. What they need is time together, away from everything. Just the two of them." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I could already feel the gravity of where this was heading, pulling me toward a place I did not want to go. "There's a resort in Cancun. 5 nights. Stunning place. On a beach views, private dining, couple spa. It would be the perfect opportunity for them to step away from everything and remember why they chose each other." She paused. "But the timing is tight. Brad's hours got cut 3 months ago and Nicole has been carrying the household. They cannot swing it right now." I said nothing. I let her continue orbiting the request, circling closer without ever landing directly on the thing she actually wanted. "I know you've been putting money away for Lucas's school situation," she said, leaning forward. "And I know that probably feels really important to you right now." "It is important." "Of course it is. Of course." She placed her hand flat on the table. The gesture she always deployed when she was about to deliver the final stage of something she had already decided. "But Derek, I need you to really listen to me here. Your boy can wait. Schools don't disappear overnight. Marriages do. Nicole needs this trip more than Lucas needs a new classroom right now. Your boy can wait." I sat with those 4 words long after she said them, turned them over in my mind like a stone picked from a riverbed, examined the weight, the texture, the cold, smooth certainty with which she had delivered them. "Your boy can wait, not your son, your boy." As if Lucas were a deferred line item. A nice-to-have that could be bumped to a future quarter without consequence. "Mom, the deadline is October 15th. The wait list closes the day after that. If I miss this window, it's gone." "So you'll find another school. There are plenty of good schools, Derek." Not like this one. And I spent a year researching this. Derek. Her voice dropped into that lower register, the one she reserved for the final stage of any discussion she intended to win. Quiet, disappointed, laced with the suggestion that resistance was not a difference of opinion but a failure of character. I am not asking you to give up on Lucas. I am asking you to help your sister save her family. Are you really going to sit here in this apartment and tell me that a school deposit matters more than a marriage? She had framed it perfectly. Any answer other than submission made me the selfish one, the small one, the one who chose paperwork over people. That was her craftsmanship. 34 years of it, refined through repetition until it operated on instinct. She could build a guilt structure faster than most people could finish a sentence. So I nodded. And my mother's face softened into the warm, approving expression she rationed like currency, and she reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said, "You're a good son, Derek. Nicole is going to be so grateful." She left within 15 minutes. The casserole sat untouched in the fridge for 3 days before I threw it away. That evening, I went to check the envelope. It was already gone. She had taken it before the conversation started. The visit was not a request. It was a notification wrapped in casserole and rehearsed concern. I stood in my bedroom holding the empty drawer liner where the envelope had been taped for months. The tape was still there, curled and warm from the afternoon sun through the window. She must have removed it while I was in the kitchen pouring her coffee. The whole performance. Or the worry about Nicole's marriage, the emotional pressure, the guilt architecture. Every word of it was delivered after the money was already resting at the bottom of her handbag. That was the moment my loyalty fractured. Not cracked. Fractured. There is a difference. A crack can heal with time and effort. A fracture changes the load-bearing structure of everything built on top of it permanently. I stood in that bedroom for a long time, holding a strip of tape that still had adhesive residue from an envelope that no longer existed, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. It would never shift back. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Nicole. "Mom told me you wanted to help with our trip. That means so much, Derek. You're the best brother. We really needed this. Love you." She thought I had offered. My mother had not simply stolen the money. She had stolen it and then manufactured my consent. Nicole genuinely believed I had volunteered. She believed I had weighed my son's enrollment against her beachfront resort and chosen her happiness willingly. I read the text 4 times. Each reading revealed another layer. I was cast as generous. Nicole was cast as grateful. And the only person who knew the actual story was the one conditioned never to tell it. I looked at Lucas's bedroom door, slightly open, the nightlight casting a blue glow through the gap. He was already asleep. He had asked me that afternoon if his new school had a basketball court. I had told him yes. He did not know the court had just been taken away from him by his grandmother. Here is something about Lucas that I need you to understand. 8 years old is not as young as people think. He had stopped asking to visit my mother's house about 2 months earlier. Not dramatically, not with a tantrum or a tearful explanation. He simply stopped requesting it. When I mentioned we could go to Grandma's for Sunday lunch, he would say, "Can we just stay home instead?" When my mother sent him a birthday card 3 weeks late with a generic message and no gift, he looked at it, placed it on the counter, and never mentioned it again. He had started keeping his drawings in his backpack instead of offering them to her when we visited. He had rearranged his small universe to exclude someone who had already excluded him from hers. At 8 years old, he had mapped the family hierarchy more accurately than I had in 34 years. He understood the ranking. He just did not have the vocabulary for it yet. But he would not lose that school, because I was going to get it back. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Nicole. "Of course. Hope you guys have a great time." Then I made a decision. The grief lasted 1 night. I allowed myself that much. I sat in the dark living room after Lucas fell asleep, and I mourned. Not the money, the mother. The version of Sandra who would have looked at that brown envelope and seen 9 months of her son's discipline and her grandson's future and felt something protective rise inside her chest. That version did not exist. I was beginning to accept that she may never have existed at all. By morning, The grief had converted into something else entirely. Not rage. Something colder, cleaner, and far more operational. I had 3 days before Nicole's flight, on the 11 days before the school deadline. The math was tight, but the math was workable. I just needed to be precise. The first thing I did was call the bank, not to yell, not to file a police report. My mother was listed as an emergency contact on my account from the months after my divorce, when I was pulling double shifts and lying awake at night worrying about what would happen to Lucas if something happened to me. I had given her limited access for genuine emergencies. She had used that access to execute a $7,400 direct withdrawal. Co-authorized by my father, Glenn. I stared at his name on the withdrawal confirmation for a long time. Glenn Calloway, his signature, not forged, not coerced. Voluntarily provided on a form that asked, in plain language, whether both parties authorized the release of funds from my account. Let me tell you something about my father. When I was 12, he drove me to a baseball card shop and helped me spend my entire birthday savings on a rookie card I had been tracking for months. On the drive home, he told me something I never forgot. He said, "A man's savings are sacred, Derek. Nobody gets to decide what they're worth except the man who earned them." He said that to a 12-year-old over a baseball card. And 22 years later, he signed a form that released his grandson's school deposit to fund a beach vacation. He did not call me. He did not text me. He did not walk into my apartment and look me in the eye and say, "Derek, your mother wants to do this and I think it's wrong, but I cannot stop her." He simply signed the paper, yet returned to his recliner and resumed his lifelong performance of uninvolvement. My father was not a passive man. He was an active man who had discovered that passivity was the most comfortable form of participation available to a coward. "I need to remove all secondary access from this account," I told the representative. "Every linked authorization, Mr. Calloway? Every single one. The changes will process within 24 hours. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes? Can you tell me how a recent travel booking to Cancun was paid for?" She checked. The resort reservation, the round-trip flights, the airport transfers. All of it charged to a credit card on file. My credit card. The number my mother had stored from the emergency access I had given her during the worst months of my life. Like she had repurposed my safety net as a payment method for a luxury vacation. $7,400 in cash from the envelope. Another $3,200 on my credit card. Nicole's anniversary getaway was funded entirely by me. The brother she believed had volunteered out of love. "I'd like to open a formal dispute on every charge connected to that booking," I said. "Absolutely, sir. Let me walk you through the process." I documented everything. Confirmation numbers, reservation codes, transfer vouchers. Each one linked to my card. Each one placed without my knowledge or consent. The dispute was filed and confirmed before noon. Then I called the travel agency directly. "Good morning. I'm calling about a booking made using my credit card without my authorization." The agent located the reservation. "Sir, I can see this booking has been flagged due to a dispute from the cardholder. Once that dispute processes through the payment network, the entire booking will be voided. Flights, hotel, and ground transfers." "How long does processing take?" 48 to 72 hours, typically. Nicole's flight departed in 3 days. I did not smile. But I understood the arithmetic perfectly. The second priority was Lucas. The trip would collapse on its own schedule. But the school deadline would not bend for anyone. I had 11 days and an empty envelope. The credit card was compromised. I needed $7,400 from somewhere that did not share my blood or my last name. I called Ray. Ray sits 2 desks from mine at work and has occupied that seat for 4 years. He has watched me arrive early, leave late. I take every shift nobody else wanted and eat the same packed lunch from a wrinkled plastic bag every single afternoon. He never pried. He never asked personal questions. But he noticed things in the way that quiet, observant people notice things. About a month before all of this happened, he had seen me looking at the Whitfield Academy website during lunch. He glanced at my screen, gave a single nod, and went back to his own work without saying a word. I called Ray and I told him the truth. All of it. The envelope, my mother, the credit card, The dispute. The school deadline. He listened without interrupting. The silence on the line was different from my mother's silence. It was not calculating. It was processing. How much do you need? He said. 7,400. I can cover 5 right now. Let me talk to my wife, Claire. She keeps a small fund for exactly this kind of thing. We'll get you the rest by tomorrow morning. Pay us back whenever you can. No interest, no deadline, no conversations about it at work. I almost broke right there. Not from the generosity itself, though it was extraordinary. From the recognition that a man I had never shared a meal with, a man who knew me only from fluorescent-lit cubicle rows and hallway coffee, was willing to do more for my son's future than the woman who brought me into this world. The money appeared in my account the next morning. I drove to Whitfield Academy during my lunch break and submitted the enrollment deposit in person. The registrar smiled and handed me a folder containing Lucas's class assignment, a supply list, and a welcome letter addressed to him by name. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes reading that letter. Then I placed it in the glove compartment, started the engine, and drove to pick Lucas up from school. "How was your day, Dad?" he asked, climbing into the back seat. "Good day, really good. How was yours?" "Pretty good. Marcus let me use his basketball again at recess. He said I have a decent jumper." "He's right, you do." "Dad?" "Yeah?" "When do I start at the new school?" "Soon, buddy, real soon." He nodded and looked out the window, satisfied in the effortless way that only 8-year-olds can be, where soon is close enough to yes that the details stop mattering. I had already made sure those details were handled. The enrollment folder was in my glove compartment. The welcome letter was addressed to my son by name. The deposit had cleared that morning. Everything that mattered was already secured, locked in place before anyone in my family suspected that the obedient son had stopped being obedient. The next morning at work, Ray caught my eye across the office. He did not ask about the deposit. He did not ask about my mother. He just nodded. The same single nod he had given me when he saw the Whitfield Academy website on my screen a month ago. I nodded back. That was the entire conversation. It was the most meaningful exchange I had with another adult that week. 3 days passed. They were the quietest 3 days of my adult life. My mother called twice during that window. The first time, she asked if I could also handle airport parking for Nicole and Brad. "It's only $40, Derek. Don't be difficult about small things." "Sure, Mom," I said, knowing the parking would never be needed. The second call was to tell me Nicole was packed and practically glowing. "She's been trying on resort outfits all afternoon. She told me to tell you thank you again. She said you're the only one who really came through for her." "That's great," I said. "Tell her I hope they have a wonderful time." My mother's voice was warm on that call, rich with satisfaction, settled. The system was functioning precisely as designed. The obedient son had absorbed every cost. The valued daughter was being celebrated. The hierarchy was intact, operational, and humming along beautifully. She had no idea the entire thing was already collapsing beneath her. At 4:52 a.m. on Tuesday morning, Nicole and Brad arrived at the airport terminal. They approached the check-in counter with matching rolling suitcases, uncoordinated passport holders, and the kind of curated excitement that people rehearse when they are about to document a vacation for an audience that measures love in resort backgrounds and sunset captions. Nicole handed over her identification and confirmation number with the bright, expectant smile of a woman who believed she deserved exactly this. The attendant typed, paused, typed again, clicked something on her screen. Then she looked up with the very specific expression of someone about to deliver information that contradicts the energy standing in front of her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This reservation has been canceled." Nicole laughed. "No, that can't be right. Can you check again, please?" The attendant checked again. "The flights have been voided. The hotel reservation has been canceled. The ground transportation has been reversed. It appears a payment dispute was filed by the original cardholder." "What cardholder? My mother arranged this trip." "The credit card on file belongs to a Derek Calloway." Nicole's face changed. Not all at once. In stages, like a building losing power floor by floor. Confusion first, brief and reflexive. Then irritation, sharp and impatient. Then the slow, spreading, sickening recognition that this was not a glitch. This was not a mistake. This was architecture, and it had been built by someone who was not standing at this counter. Brad stood behind her, holding both passports with the hollow expression of a man who had just realized the vacation he had packed for was never actually his. "Nicole, what's going on?" he said. "I don't know. Just let me handle this." "Handle what?" They said the whole thing is canceled." "I know what they said, Brad. Give me a second." She pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. Not from cold. Nicole called my mother at 4:53 a.m. My mother called me at 4:54. I know precisely what that voicemail sounded like because I listened to it later that morning, sitting on the couch with my coffee while Lucas ate cereal in the kitchen 10 feet away. It started with authority. "Derek, there is a problem with Nicole's flight. Call me back immediately." A pause. A recalibration. "They're saying the booking was canceled. Something about a dispute on your card?" "Derek, what did you do?" A longer pause. And then something I had never heard before in my mother's voice. A fracture. The sound of someone reaching for a control panel and discovering the buttons no longer responded to her touch. "Derek, call me back. Call me back right now." I saved the voicemail. Not for revenge. For clarity. For the next time my resolve might soften. For the next holiday when she would call with warmth in her voice and manufactured concern in her words, and I would need to remember exactly what authority sounded like when it crumbled at 4 in the morning. I placed my phone on the kitchen counter and finished my coffee. By mid-morning, I had 11 missed calls. 6 from my mother, 3 from Nicole, 2 from my father, who had apparently rediscovered the use of his phone now that the financial infrastructure he had co-signed into existence was malfunctioning. Nicole's text arrived at 7:14 a.m. "Derek, what is going on? Mom said you canceled our trip. Why would you do this to us?" I replied with one sentence. "I didn't book your trip." 5 seconds of silence. I could feel the weight of those seconds from across town. The mental recalculation happening in real time behind Nicole's eyes. If Derek did not book the trip, then who told her he had offered? If Derek did not authorize the charges, then who used his card? If Derek did not volunteer the money, then where did $7,400 come from? Every single question funneled back to the same kitchen table, the same casserole dish, the same woman who had performed a rescue mission for one child using the stolen future of the other. Nicole called my mother again. I was not on that call. But I know what followed because Nicole texted me 40 minutes later. "Derek, I am so sorry. I didn't know. She told me you offered." I swear I believed her. I read the message. I did not reply. Not because I hated Nicole. I did not. But let me be precise about what kind of person my sister is. She had received $7,400 from a brother living in a 2-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and a son who wore sneakers one size too small because the budget that month could not stretch any further. And she had never once paused to wonder how that math worked. She had never called me to say, "Derek, are you sure you can afford this?" She had never texted to ask, "Is Lucas's school situation handled?" She had simply absorbed the money, typed her thank you, and gone back to selecting resort outfits. Because in the world Nicole inhabited, receiving large sums of money from people who had less than her was not suspicious. It was familiar. It was how things had always worked in our family. She had grown up on the receiving end of a system she never had to understand, because understanding it would have required her to question whether she deserved her position in it. She never questioned the story because the story was comfortable. Because in my mother's hierarchy, Nicole receiving a luxury vacation funded by her struggling brother was not strange. It was the natural order of things. Nicole was not a monster. She was something more common and more difficult to forgive. She was a person who had been given every reason to look closer and had chosen, every single time, not to. By noon, my mother had pivoted into full narrative repair. I know this because my uncle, Richard, called me early that afternoon. His voice carried the careful tone of a man who had been briefed by one party and was beginning to suspect the briefing was incomplete. "Derek, your mother called me this morning. She's saying you deliberately sabotaged Nicole's anniversary trip to punish the family. She says you've been bitter since the divorce and you're taking it out on everyone. She says you might need professional help." "What do you think, Uncle Rich?" A pause. I think I'm only hearing one side of this. Would you like the other side? I opened my banking app, took 3 screenshots. The unauthorized withdrawal record showing 7,400 pulled from my account. The credit card statement showing the Cancun bookings charged to my number. And the dispute confirmation with timestamps proving I had filed within 48 hours of discovering the charges. I sent all 3 in one message to my uncle. No caption, no explanation, no emotional commentary, just the numbers. Uncle Richard called back in 12 minutes. His voice had changed completely. I had no idea, Derek. None. I know you didn't. This is not even close to what she described. She made it sound like you had a breakdown and lashed out at Nicole for no reason. Does that sound like me, Uncle Rich? No, it does not. He went quiet for a few seconds. What do you need from me? Nothing. I just needed one person in this family to see the actual math. What happened next is something my mother did not anticipate. Uncle Richard did not keep the screenshots to himself. He forwarded them to my Aunt Patricia, who forwarded them to my cousin Elaine, who texted my mother directly and said, Sandra, is this true? Within 3 hours, the screenshots had traveled through the family network faster than any version of events my mother could construct. She had built her narrative on the assumption that nobody would ever verify, that the family operated on trust. But trust, it turns out, has a receipt problem. When receipts enter the conversation, trust does not protect the liar. It exposes her. My mother called me 4 more times that evening. I let every call ring through to voicemail. Each message was shorter and smaller than the last. The first was 30 seconds of accusation. The second was 20 seconds of justification. The third was 10 seconds of silence followed by, Derek, please. The final one was 6 seconds long. She said my name twice. Then she hung up. My father called once. He did not leave a message. The man who had signed the form that started all of this could not find a single sentence to put on the record now that the form had been made public. Over the following week, the fallout hardened into its permanent shape. Nicole did not take her trip. Brad, the husband whose marriage was supposedly crumbling into dust, posted a photo on social media that Saturday of himself standing on a golf course under a clear October sky. The caption read, "Perfect weather for 18 holes." His marriage was never in crisis. The anniversary trip was never therapeutic. It was performance content. A curated luxury experience designed for the front-facing camera of a life that appeared flawless from every angle and was funded, invisibly, by someone the frame never included. My mother made one final attempt. Then she sent a group text to the entire family. I love all my children equally. Families go through difficult times. I hope we can move past this and heal together. Nobody replied. The message sat in the thread with every read receipt visible and every response line empty. A row of small gray check marks confirming that each person had seen her words, considered them, and selected silence. A verdict delivered without a single syllable. I did not respond either. Instead, I did something small that felt enormous. I opened my phone contacts, scrolled down to the entry that said, Mom, and tapped Edit. I looked at those 3 letters for a while. Mom. The word that had meant safety when I was 5. Obligation when I was 15. Guilt when I was 25. And extraction when I was 34. I deleted the 3 letters and typed 5 new ones. Sandra. Then I saved the contact and closed the phone. I did not block her. I did not delete her number. I reclassified her. Moved her from the category of people whose calls I answered out of duty into the category of people whose calls I answered only if I chose to. It took 4 seconds. It changed the architecture of my entire life. Then I put the phone down and made dinner. 2 weeks later, on a Monday morning in late October, I woke Lucas up at 6:45. He was groggy and confused because our usual departure time was an hour later. "Where are we going?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Somewhere new." He put on the shirt I had laid out for him and grabbed the backpack I had bought the day before. It was dark blue and comically oversized for his frame. He tightened the straps until it rode high on his shoulders like a turtle shell and examined himself in the hallway mirror with quiet, serious approval. I drove him to Whitfield Academy. The building was red brick with tall windows and an American flag catching the early morning light out front. Parents were dropping off children along the curb in that practiced, ordinary rhythm of car doors and backpack adjustments and quick waves that I had been watching from the outside for a year. Lucas stared through the car window without speaking. Then he turned to me. Is this it? This is it. He reached for the door handle, then stopped and looked back. Dad? Yeah? Does it have the basketball court? Indoor and outdoor. He smiled. Not the performative smile children offer adults when they want approval. A real one. Small and private, like a fact he was storing somewhere safe inside himself. Then he pushed the door open, stepped onto the sidewalk, and walked through the gate with that enormous backpack bouncing against his spine. I watched him until he disappeared through the front entrance. I sat in the car for a full minute. The engine was off. The phone on the passenger seat was silent. It had been silent for days. There were no envelopes to guard, no calls to dread, no hierarchy to maintain. No one standing over my shoulder deciding whether my son's future was worth investing in. I started the engine and drove to work. That is the new life. It is smaller than the one I had planned. It is quieter than the one my mother designed for my sister. But every single piece of it belongs to me. Every dollar accounted for. Every decision made by me. For my son, yes, without apology and without anyone's permission. I do not tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because somewhere out there, someone's mother just said the same words mine did, and that person is sitting on the edge of their bed right now, wondering if they are allowed to say no. You are. Thanks for listening.